Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tower of Babel Game of Thrones breakdown for Season 4, Episode 8, The Mountain and the Viper. As always, I'm joined by Daniel.
Yo.
I'm Julian. We're back 2 weeks. The show's been off. Game of Thrones took a Memorial Day weekend in the States off for a break. They do that every year. So it's been 2 weeks since we've had an episode of this. It's 2 weeks since we said an episode of Game of Thrones. So I'm ready to get back into it. So it was actually a really good episode. I'm not one of my favorites actually for this season, but we'll get into that.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know, right? But we'll get into it. Make sure to, if you're enjoying the show and if you're coming back here for not the first time, make sure you're liking us on Facebook and Twitter, and leaving a review on iTunes. If this is the first time that you're joining us on the Tower of Babel Game of Thrones breakdown, know that we review the show as a show, not as the books. And Daniel doesn't spoil anything for us from future episodes. So, because he's read the books, right?
Yeah.
All right. So with that all out of the way, we can get right into it. We'll start with the credits. We have a new location. Where?
Mokalin.
Which is somewhere between King's Landing and Winterfell.
Yeah, they didn't really do a great job explaining it, but it's like the holdfast that's in charge of what's called the neck is like a narrow piece of land that separates the north from everything else.
Okay.
So basically anything going north has to pass through Moat Cailin or its lands, and its lands are all like boggy and marshes.
It's like a moat, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of the idea. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why it might be called Moat Cailin.
It's always said that like 100 men holding Moat Cailin can repel an army of thousands just because of the land and everything.
Okay. Well, and they do kind of show that when they show like a whole bunch of dead people, like in between, like the hard land and the actual castle. So we start in Molestown, the first scene, which has very much like a feel like the Prancing Pony, like scene from the Lord of the Rings, where it's like got like the dark streets and like the pub, I guess. What would you call it? Like
Yeah, pub is a good way. Inn,
yeah,
whorehouse, whatever.
And so we're catching up with Gilly, which I don't think we've ever seen just her on her own since we saw Sam drop her off there.
Yeah.
I guess that might have been a couple weeks ago now already. Like
It's been a
like
while.
at least 3. And so we see some some whores, and they're entertaining, I guess. And I actually thought it was fun. Like, so she's doing like a burp version of a song, which is kind of lame. But it's like, I feel like it's like a running joke with the people who make the show that there's only 2 songs in Westeros. It's only the Grains of Castamere and the Bear and the Maiden Fair. So really, when someone's trying to guess a song that someone's burping, it's really only a 50-50 shot. It's one or the other.
And also, they sound all the burping sounded exactly the same. But whatever.
Yeah. Well, we're not gonna. This isn't the Tower of Babel burping breakdown. So, so Gilly's still there doing her job. She doesn't seem particularly happy about it, and neither do the people who are like have to work with her. And then we hear like this like owl like sound, but it's kind of a great callback to what we've seen with Jon when he was with the wildlings, and we know that they use that kind of like that bird sound as like a signal to like start an attack, right? So we kind of have a good idea was coming. Not only that, and they've been kind of talking about this for a while, like that. Oh, the wildlings have been attacking
moving north. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we see all our favorite wildling buddies. The guy with the beard, whatever his name was.
Tormund.
The guy with the weird face who eats people.
Steer.
And our favorite chick.
Ygritte.
And they're all just killing people mercilessly. But I guess Ygritte finds Gilly, and has, with her last morsel of remorse, she kind of like lets her live, I guess.
Because she's got a baby Guess
Yeah,
that makes a difference.
I guess presumably it makes some sort of difference. Who knows? Or maybe she recognizes her wildling ness or something. um, the scene itself is pretty dark and like there's blood
Oh yeah.
literally dripping from the ceiling. And it's important to get this kind of stuff out of the way. I feel like a lot of this episode is just getting stuff out of the way, which is why I didn't like it that much. I like the same thing with episode 1, was just getting things out of the way for episode 2, and this feels like it's getting
Oh,
things out of the
I
way
don't.
for.
All right, keep
No,
going.
you
This
don't
was
think
a
so?
very. I thought a lot of shit got accomplished in this episode. It was a really busy episode.
It was really busy. I just don't think it was done particularly, like wasn't executed particularly well in certain parts. Anyway, like it's got this scene here, which is which is fine. Best guess, like based on what we know is coming next week. The title of next week's episode is "The Watchers on the Wall." I'm guessing it's gonna be very much similar as like the Blackwater type episode, very much like a one location dealing with a lot of stuff. This easily could have fit in next week. You could have started that and then dealt right
Yeah,
with through everything.
but it has to feel more gradual, and there's other stuff they have to get covered next week as well. It's not gonna be just at the wall.
Okay, all right, if you say so. I mean, I'm guessing I'm gonna say 95% at the wall next week.
I'd say a bit less, but the majority at the wall for sure.
Mhm.
I think it's gonna be over 2 episodes. What happens at the wall, though? I think
Really?
it'll be started and it'll whatever happens, and then it'll be concluded in the 10th.
Okay. And then we have Castle Black. We have Sam Senior fretting about Sam Junior, and whole leaving Gilly at Molestown, and he should feel bad about it because he did
Because it was dumb.
was fucking stupid. So keep feeling bad. But he gets like a whole don't worry, she's a survivor type thing from his buddies. So he feels a little bit better about himself. But then they kind of like do this whole thing where they're just kind of having like a discussion on like life and how they have really no chance of winning against this whole wildling army. And then they keep talking about this how they have no chance, and I'm going to bring this up again later because I actually have like a problem with what was going on in Game of Thrones as far as like storytelling, and I'll bring it up at the end because I think it ties to better that way, but I'll get back to that. So I guess it's like I said, it's a bit of foreshadowing for what's going to happen next week, and I think we have a pretty good idea, right?
Yeah, setting the stage. Like I guess they've kind of mentioned the numbers, but yeah, like I said, it has to
102.
feel gradual. Yeah, it has to feel like the wildlings are coming at them from both ends, and there's nothing they can do but wait. So they have like all their only real choice is to cheers and have that drink.
Yeah, I guess. Either way, I'm still that doesn't like that aside. I'm still really excited for what's going to happen next week. I mean,
Yeah.
Blackwater was still one of the best episodes of the series. So if this is anything as good as Blackwater next week, then I'll be happy. And I want to see this bonfire that the biggest bonfire the North's ever seen. I want to see what they do. Then we move over to Marine, and I could not care less about anything that's going on with this storyline. I'm trying. I tried. I really do. I'm trying, but I just can't care about Grey Worm and Missandei. Like I just like.
No, yeah, it's dumb.
Are they? Is this from the book? Like, is this
No.
like this is filler, right?
This is I'm pretty sure this is just because like they have these actors and they need to like get their money's worth out of them, give them a little bit and give them a little bit more of a story because in the Sandy's like a child and Grey Worm is just the unique command. Like he doesn't have his own personality. Like
He just Grey Worm, just
yeah,
some guy.
like yeah, pretty
Okay.
much.
So yeah, I don't like. I just can't. I don't care. Like I mean, Missandei's like pretty enough naked,
This is good looking. Yeah,
but like the scene where like they're like bathing or whatever is like really dumb. Like super. He's literally doing that thing where kids do when they're like little, where they think that if they just peek their head up out of the water, like no one can see them, but like everyone can tell because it's water. There's nothing really hiding you, right? And like she's like staring, like she clearly knows he's looking, and then she like stands and like super slowly covers herself. It's like okay, and then they have this whole talk. Danny and Missandei have like a girl talk, and like she's doing like Danny's doing Missandei's hair, which makes no sense because like why would unless they're like besties? I guess I don't know.
girls like to do each other's hair. That's what sleepovers are for.
Okay, and then there's the funny line about the pillar and stones.
Yeah.
But like either way, like this whole thing is just like. It feels like
Boring.
filler and it's super boring. Like I went and checked my phone while this scene was playing out because I was like super lame.
I don't know. You're right. Like there were a lot of boring parts of this episode. Like as a whole, there were a couple other ones that was like this. but I think in terms of things that got accomplished, it's for sure one of my favorite
Okay, like
episodes.
so, yes, some cool stuff happens, and we'll obviously get to that. But I think, and it probably beats episode one, just the fact that things actually do happen. In episode one, nothing really actually does happen. Same thing with a couple episodes ago, where it was all just felt like everything just
Mhm.
reset afterwards. I don't remember which episode it was
It was
now.
just, yeah, the one with like Locke and them at the wall at the Craster's.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, I just like. Is there any reason we should care about these two people? Like,
No, them not. Well, I mean, you care about them because Danny cares about them. They're part of
I
her
guess.
little entourage, and I mean, they're trying to give them more personality and make them more memorable for the audience. But yeah, you're like I've been complaining about filler a lot this season, and this is another one of those.
Okay. Well, at least I've made my stance clear. I don't think the show has made has given us any reason to actually care about why they might have a romance. Like, and just
Yeah,
never mind that. Even if for some reason people did really have like were connected with these two characters, which I don't know why you would be. Um, it's not really even done that well, and like they spent a lot of time on it. Like three full scenes that are like a good chunk of this episode that I don't think need to be there at all.
yeah, I
Like I'd
agree.
rather spend more time with Arya and the Hound than have to deal with these two. Um, but I said my piece. We can move on unless there's anything else you want to say.
I agree with that for this particular part of that, anyways.
Okay. Then we have Moat Kalen. We can go over there, and which is appropriate because we did see it in the beginning. And we have Ramsey, and I'm just gonna start calling them Reek from now on, just because
Yeah,
like yeah,
yeah,
um,
they do that in the books too.
yeah, and they're hanging out. He's all kind of like clean shaven and ready to be like looking kind of like he did when he was Theon, except for the crazy eyes. Um,
Yeah.
and so I mean the visuals are great here. Like Mo Kalen looks really cool. That whole part of the north where it's like kind of wet-ish and it's like halfway between the north and south, I guess, like you said,
Yeah.
is kind of is like is cool. It's kind of like the permafrost is like thawing at this part here, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so he's sent in there, and at first you think like he's doing a pretty good job of acting like Theon again. You're like, oh, okay. It was like almost like jarring how much he just sounded like Theon again. But then like it only lasted like 5 minutes before he started like breaking
Yeah,
down.
that's all he had. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Alfie Allen has been doing really good. Like he obviously plays Theon,
Really good.
but and so this continues here. As he's playing, Reek slash playing Reek or Theon playing as Reek playing Theon again. It's confusing, but the idea here is that he essentially is sent in and he is portrays his like fellow Ironborn, who I don't know if he doesn't. It's not clear if he knew. I guess they do kind of say like he kind of thought they might be let go, but they weren't. Ramsay flays them. He really
Mhm.
loves to flay people. He loves that like
Traditions are
sigil. Yeah,
important.
sigil. He does say that, right?
Yeah.
Tradition is important in this episode.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, really, this whole thing is really set up because we know that um, um, we know that Theon is like kind of like already under his thumb anyway. So it's like we already kind of know that. We already know that he's betrayed his sister. So that's not like what he does here isn't really surprising. It's what happens after with Roose Bolton that's really cool. So a great scene. Like I don't know if this CG or what, like, or if that's just how Ireland looks like, or wherever this is, like Northern Ireland, right? It's where most
Yeah.
of this
I'm
North
pretty sure
South.
that's how parts of Northern
But
Ireland
like
look.
it must be um, uh, like when they're
When
standing
you
on
get
that
the right tape
hilltop,
for it.
right? And they're
Yeah.
standing on that, like it's gotta be like enhanced with CG because like that view is like crazy, right? But maybe not. If that's a real place, that's really cool. Either way, the visuals are awesome, and it kind of starts weirded out like in a weird way though, and they're like having like a face off, like they're like standing apart, um, like 20 feet
Just-
apart from each other,
yeah.
like with like two separate armies, but it's like they're really almost one. So they go for a walk, and Roose Bolton um, gives Ramsay his family name. So Ramsay was
See snow.
Roose Snow, which means he was a bastard son of Roose Bolton, and he gave him his family name. So what's the like the precedence here. Like this doesn't happen very often, I'm guessing, right?
No, most bastards are, ostracized, but he gives him the Bolton name, and that also makes him the heir to, like as you mentioned, he's the Warden of the North. That
Mm-hmm.
would make Ramsay the heir to all of that power of the North and everything. It's a big step, and Roose doesn't have any natural children, so it's all Ramsay.
Okay. Um, it just makes you think that will he regret this, like giving him his name decision, and if Game of Thrones is Game of Thrones, probably he'll probably end up regretting it, just because Ramsay is literally a psychopath.
But
Um,
you do get the impression that he actually has like reverence for his father.
yeah, but
This
he
is
doesn't have reverence for the people or the land. He would
no,
not make
no,
a
no.
good warden of the North.
It's not like Roose Bolton cares that much about the people either. He's kind
That's
of a
true.
dick too.
Well, we haven't really seen
Not
him
to the
like
same.
ruling in any significant way. He just did some underhanded things to get to that position, but he might
Yeah,
actually be a good, warden. Who knows? I mean, they haven't really shown us that.
yeah.
You don't get that impression, I guess. So it just seems odd. Like, so this doesn't happen often, like you said. But even in like Dorne, where like bastards aren't really treated like poorly, they're still called sand. So it's like, I wonder what, like he's doing this purely just because he has no other heir. Is his wife dead? Like we don't.
No, he married a Frey.
Oh,
Remember
that's
he
right. But his
that
previous wife, did
larger
he had
lady.
a wife before that?
Yeah, yeah, and she died.
And that's
He
never
had a wife.
is what?
It's not a big deal.
Oh,
Like it's
okay.
not
Not
really
really talked about or
emphasized. Yeah,
important in any way. Okay.
yeah,
He married that fat one, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's unlikely that there'll be another Bolton, unless there is, and maybe that like kind of like ruins Ramsay's. I'm just speculating here. Ramsay gets jealous. Gets worried about him like
Yeah.
going back on his word. Blah blah blah. But anyway, this is the week of important letters, which we'll see again later, because he gives him. He couldn't just tell him that he was doing it. He put it in writing, I guess, because to make it
Has to
official.
be legit. Yeah.
So moving on into the Eyrie.
Well,
Wait,
before
oh
we
yeah,
move on,
okay, yeah.
one other thing to mention, like you say, we're going to move into our new home, and then it pans to a castle.
All right, I was gonna ask, is that Winterfell?
Yeah, it's Winterfell. You can see a little bit of smoke rising above it. Apparently, it's still smoking, but
I don't think
but
those are clouds. I'm pretty sure those are clouds.
no, there was distinct smoke in the clouds.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's Winterfell. That's the seat of the Warden of the North. It's always been a Stark thing, but
Yeah.
now it's not. Um, just a side note, it's like a long way from the neck and from Loki. Just the way they've been juggling everything, like geographically, is
Oh,
weird, but
dang,
not a big deal.
obviously they flew. Damn.
Oh,
They got on the International Mokalan Airport, and they flew there, and then they took their horses the rest of the way. Obviously.
obviously.
Yeah. So the Eyrie, that's where we're going to next, and this is where a lot of stuff actually happens that I liked,
Yeah.
but some of it I was meh. Um,
Okay.
So we start with Littlefinger, Lord Baelish getting kind of like grilled, seeing what happened, because last thing we saw with them was Lady Arryn being pushed out the moon door by Littlefinger himself. So
Yeah.
we know he's guilty, but they don't know that. So this is a judge or a jury of Lords of the Vale. Is that
It's more, yeah, it's just a couple Lords of the Vale. It's not really a trial yet.
okay? So they're just kind of trying to determine what happened.
Yeah.
Essentially, okay. So as I understand it, this happens differently in the books, right? How everything goes down, right?
It's weird. I think I like the way that they did it in the show. In the books, there's this one other person in the room, and he ends up being blamed for it.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's just some singer that, whatever.
So
He's a guy that in season 2, Joffrey had his tongue cut out, but that's like.
but like,
not
who cares
important.
about that guy? So
Yeah.
there's no okay. So you actually like that? I was gonna ask my question was, which version do you prefer, this version or the book version?
I kind of like this version because it's this. The story is the same. It's still Sansa. You think that she's betraying him, but then she actually like just makes it believable enough that she can put real emotion into it,
Mm-hmm.
but still saves him. And you would obviously these people knowing Lady Lysa, like you could believe that lady was unhinged, and you could believe
Yeah.
that she would be suicidal. Like it's this,
She's like, yeah, we all know she's crazy. Like they bring it up like 3 times. Like, yeah, she was pretty crazy. Yeah, she was
Yeah.
crazy, but was she that crazy? Like,
yeah, no, I like what they did with it.
yeah. So and then Sansa's whole like story thing was great. Like the way she starts and then she's like, I have to tell the truth, which really, in retrospect, like thinking about it, it's like because the way they play it is like she's gonna betray him, tell him everything that happened because that would be how old Sansa would have done it, right? But then like the whole thing gets to the point where like the story's going into the point it's like it's all true, like what happened with her being in King's Landing and how she was a prisoner and like how she got taken back there by Littlefinger and all that stuff. That's all true. But then she gets to the part where she kind of just smudges the truth a little bit. She doesn't really lie. She just kind of bends it. Yeah. And it's like in retrospect, it's like it makes perfect sense. You're gonna make it sound like you're betraying him, but really you're not. Make it even more believable that what you're saying is true, right? Which is very like manipulative thing to do, which is not very much. I guess she's been learning.
Yeah, exactly. She's just growing. And
yeah. Like I like the look on her eyes when she's like, crying and hugging that lady, and like she just kind of looks up at Baelish, and he's like got a knowing look in his eyes, like he's like, oh, thank God, and he also probably wasn't expecting that. I think he was very much expecting her to like tell him what happened.
He had happily surprised.
He had a look of like actual like terror in his eyes there for a little bit. Like I was wondering if he was gonna get up and like say something or like, but he was just kind of like letting it play out.
Worked out.
So yeah, like so what her story is essentially the same. She kind of tells the story of like what happened in like the courtyard with the kiss a little bit differently, and then like even what he says about like only loving one woman, everything, like even that's true. She just doesn't tell everything. And then the last little part is obviously where she kind of she says something and then jumps out or steps off. But after that, so he gets off and they're all buddy again, the Lords of the Vale and Littlefinger. And their plan is to do what exactly? Like I'm not sure what they're.
Well, it's not really clear, but he wants them because the Knights of the Vale, that's one of the seven kingdoms that just stayed out of the whole conflict.
Yeah,
and he's kind of saying they could have really used their help, like Robb Stark could have used their help. A long time ago, but there's no really left for them to back.
Yeah,
but it wasn't really clear what his plan was for them. It was just that he wanted them to be like to get active,
Okay.
They didn't finish explaining it before the new Sansa came out.
Yeah, well, like they're like, well, we're gonna take Robin, we're gonna like take him on like a world tour, like.
Well, one of the things that again, I guess they haven't really mentioned, like, how children are fostered at different houses.
Yeah.
Generally, like Ned and Robert Baratheon were both fostered at the Eyrie. They did mention that. So, when Jon Arryn died, there was a whole big controversy about where Robin would go. I think Robert Baratheon had wanted him to be fostered with Stannis, but then other people wanted him to be fostered at Casterly Rock, and then Lady Lysa just left.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was like he's just sickly kid that needs to learn some things, and he's not going to learn them here. He needs to be fostered somewhere.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's what Littlefinger's trying to get at with it.
Oh, okay. And okay, so if you were them, where would you? I mean,
at this point, it's kind of.
It's like he's kind of too old. Like
not even too old. Like they don't really have too many friends.
Yeah, and it's like really. And do you really want to leave him with like grumpy old Stannis? Like really though, like probably one of the worst parents you could ever think of. Who locks his daughter up in a fucking tower. But yeah, you mentioned the new Sansa, but before we get there, there's a really brief scene with Littlefinger kind of talking to her in her chamber, and she's sewing something. We'll see what it is later, but and he says like, essentially, why did you help me? Paraphrasing, and she's like, oh, I know what you want. And like
gives him a little
it gives like a look there, right? And then he's like, oh shit, like I think she actually might know. And
that might be like her trying to play him too.
Yeah, right. So then we get this next scene where he's talking to Robin, and then she walks out of nowhere, and she's wearing like feathers, I guess. Like it's odd. It's a weird dress, but her hair's also dyed dark, which I didn't know they had hair dye in the Seven Kingdoms, but that's beyond. I guess it makes sense. Sure. I
Yeah,
mean, and she's like dressed like Maleficent. Like she's got like um
just
and yeah, I
badass.
mean, she's got like this like strut going on, like this new whole like attitude thing, which is like, see, it's really very much out of character. But maybe it's
Hmm.
so
Well, the whole point is that she's sort of becoming a new character. Like she's becoming Elaine, not Sansa.
oh, okay. Is that so?
Because
They
yeah,
all
that
agreed
her
they're gonna keep
yeah.
her dynasty. Okay,
So she has to look different and like that. Yeah. So she's not Sansa anymore.
still
Yeah,
though.
she's acting like it.
Okay, if that's what it is, then sure. It just seems like that. It didn't seem like what is it? It's like, oh shit, I do know she does know what Littlefinger wants, which is her. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
we can get that out of the way, and that she's kind of finally saying, okay, well, there's somewhere I can take power here, and I'm gonna do it with this like weird black dress thing.
Well, it could be a bit of both.
Okay, all right, fair enough. That's just how I interpret it. Um, anything left to talk about with Sansa, Littlefinger, Lords of the Vale?
Well, just Arya and the Hound also made it there. In the
Yeah,
episode.
that was the next thing. Is that so? They kind of they saunter up. They mention his wound again in the neck, which usually is not a good sign. They talk about things more than once.
Yeah.
And they get to the bloody gate, and they find out that Lysa's dead, and then Arya just like starts laughing like a crazy person. And it's literally just left there, like she just.
And that's it. Yeah.
Which this okay? Here's another. This bothered me too because there's no okay. Sure, she's dead, but like there's probably still people there that would still pay a ransom for Arya. It's like it's given the
Yeah.
impression that they just leave. Like okay, we're done. Like, that sucks.
Yeah.
But
Well, they don't
like
really say where they're going. But the thing is, Arya said she's never even met Lysa. I don't know if anybody would believe them. Like
oh,
you could just have some random girl be like, "This is Arya Stark. Give me some money."
that's true. But I mean, like
The
Littlefinger's
only person
there.
there that would, yeah, there are people like Littlefinger and Sansa that would recognize
Yeah,
her
exactly. And they're there, and they would probably pay money for them.
for sure.
Or whatever the Hound's after, which is apparently money, right?
Yeah.
So like, why like it just that bothers me. It's like okay, we are having two Starks come close together. They're almost gonna meet, and it's just like at this point, it's just teasing for the sake of teasing. It's like there's no reason they couldn't now. At this point, there's no realistic reason that they would just leave after coming that far.
Well, I mean, see what happens next week.
I'm excited to see what happens next week because if that happens, I'm gonna throw something at my television. So yeah, I think that pretty much that covers
Yeah,
everything
it wasn't. That was
there.
nothing really. Yeah.
So yeah, that was where my problem is with this whole like
It
teasing.
was kind of weird for them to leave it like that. It was
Yeah,
just a
like the
little
laughing thing, like
nothing.
I mean like I kind of get it, like she's crazy, like she literally starts off the whole thing where the only time she's happy is when she was like killing those like people, and then they're talking about like how she wished she was there when Joffrey died and stuff. Like she's clearly crazy now, like a crazy person,
It's
but
just
like
obsessed with death. Yeah.
but like starts laughing like that. That's like legit crazy person stuff. That's like the Joker. I don't know. What do you make of the laugh anyway?
Well, I don't. I think it was just more like they've come so far, and then they would just 3 days too late. She died 3 days before they got there, and it was just like a long journey almost for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't really care about her aunt. She just like it was just a lot of frivolity.
Yeah, so it's all just for not. Yeah, I guess everything's all. It's all for nothing. It's like
Yeah.
you can see. I guess you could see the humor in it if you weren't crazy. So we go back to Marine, and things are actually happening that are important all of a sudden now.
Yeah.
So when I was doing my research for the show notes, I kind of found something that that
Spoiled
sometimes
something?
no, didn't spoil something for myself, but I did find something that like sometimes like I would miss, like when Tywin was asking Mace Tyrell at that council meeting for his pen or his quill and like parchment or whatever. This is probably the outcome of that. A letter that is given to Sir Barristan. And it's sealed with what? I didn't quite catch that. Like it's got like is that a royal seal or?
It was a seal of a red hand. It's supposed to be the hand of the
Okay,
king.
okay. I wasn't sure what it was. I knew it was red. Wasn't sure. So he gives him a letter that is a pardon for Jorah for the work he did spying on Dany, right?
Yeah,
And it
and
says it,
Viserys.
but it says it's signed by Robert Baratheon. So is it like forged, or is this like an old letter? Like I
I
don't.
wasn't really clear on that either because there was a letter back in season
Yeah,
one.
and he like destroyed that. Like he got rid of that letter, right? He,
You'd think so, but I mean, maybe yeah, I don't know if this
but
is a
even if
forgery, but
like okay, so even if he didn't destroy it and kept it, he probably wouldn't be showing it to people, right? So um, either this it seems to me like this may be a forgery, but like then why is it newly sealed? Like because we
yeah,
know that Robert Baratheon's been dead for like literally years now.
yeah.
So like
I mean, there could have been more than one letter. The whole thing with sending letters by Raven is that it's not the most reliable way to get your message across.
they do actually make it seem like it is pretty reliable. Like they go where you want
Well,
them to go.
in the books, they often say like they send a couple. They say multiple rivers, because you lose some to hawks, you lose some to just like arrows and whatnot, and just the wind.
Okay. Um. So anyway, Barristan does I guess, kind of an honorable thing and gives him like the heads up, like man to man, like he says.
Yeah, just confronts him about it.
I like how the scene is like shot and like composed. Like he's got like he's studying a map of Westeros and Essos, and he like follows the map up to King's Landing, and then pulls out Jorah standing there. Barristan comes up. We don't know what's happening with this letter yet, and then we get the big reveal that he knows what happened, and you're kind of your days here are done, kind of thing, right? Yeah. Which is like, why even give him that? Like, why even tell him that? Like, what does that? How does that really help him? Like, prepare himself for?
It's more just like again a testament to Barristan's honor. Like he couldn't go behind his back. You just had to let him know man to man before.
But yeah, I'm gonna be letting Dany know.
I have to tell Daenerys about this.
Yeah,
and I guess he also kind of wanted to see Jorah's reaction.
Yeah, they always kind of butted heads a little bit. Hey, like they kind of both kind of filled the same role in like their job on the small council. So it's like.
And Barristan had issues with Jorah because Jorah hasn't been the most honorable person.
Yeah,
he was exiled for slaving, and now they're there freeing slaves.
Yeah, it's like hypocrite much.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have a scene in the throne room, and Dany's sitting there all regal, and she's got her peeps around her. And Jorah comes in, and he tries to plead his case, obviously to no avail. And then Dany, this is where she gets a little harsh. I mean, like maybe not so much because like it's understandable. It's like you found out someone was spying on you the whole time. It might even the whole time. Like it was only for a while, and he tries to explain that. Like, hey, I told you, and they bring up this whole thing with the wine that hasn't happened for 3 seasons. It's like,
well, that's someone tried to kill her and her child because of him.
That's true. That is true.
And also that was kind of the impetus for Drogo to actually lead his army, right? After the one thing happened, that's what because at that point Drogo didn't want to go yet to the Seven Kingdoms. He was doing other shit.
Yeah.
So after that, he just got in a mad rage, and they went and started reaping and whatever, and then that's when he got cut. It's kind of like that's a couple steps, but I'm just saying, like it's more about the baby.
Okay. Which she obviously had to, like, she lost her child and then got the dragons, kind of thing. Like it's kind of she's obviously pissed off about it, exiles him, which I guess is maybe a little bit like pretty nice of her, I guess, considering not just killing him. Says just tells him to leave, and it's kind of like leaves the question. It's like, where does that leave? Where does that leave Dany with, like, because you could say that Jorah's been like offered some pretty good advice,
He's been her rock.
Yeah. Well,
she said that.
Oh, okay. I was like, that's pretty lame. And
more like, where does that leave him?
Yeah, and like, where does that leave him? Like, I feel like, to me, like, if you were to fall, it's like if you were to follow up with Jorah like a year later, he's just like a drifter, and he's just like moving around, or he's like a hermit in some like living in some like small village somewhere in Essos. It's like I feel like he just has no pardon now.
Yeah,
I don't see him like going over to Westeros and like claiming that the pardon, just because like I don't think, first of all, I don't think they would honor it, and second of all, I don't think he really wants to go back there, especially knowing, like, he was like, why would you go back knowing what Dany has planned, like, and with the dragons, like, do you really want to be there when dragon fires rain down on, like, what I mean? So, like, he's not going to return home to Bear Island, right? That's where they're from.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe like that's a long shot, that one.
All of that stuff, not only long shot, is far, far away
Yeah,
and
right.
hard to
So
get
that
to just with just one horse.
so presumably he still has some money. Like they were
Yeah.
pretty rich when he was. So I don't know. We'll see. It just it leaves them in an interesting place. Like with this, if this is the last we see of Dany this season, which is very possible, or at least of Jorah probably. I'm kind of fine with
Hmm.
that. I like the way it wrapped up. You're not really sure what the plan is, what Barristan is going to be leaning. I think we know kind of that he's kind of always leaned like, let's just go to Westeros. Like it's going to work. Don't worry about it. Jorah's kind of like leaned on the whole like patience kind of side. So
Yeah. Need an army still.
we'll see how that plays out, and I'm interested. Like that's a good way to leave it for a season. So if there's even if we do see them once again, that's still like lingering there. I like that.
Yeah, of course.
You have anything else you want to say about the stuff in Marine?
No, that covers it pretty much. It's yeah, what's gonna happen in Jorah is the biggest thing that you
It's
take
the
away from
biggest thing.
that.
Is like it's interesting because I like Jorah. It's not that interesting because Jorah's not that really important of a character on his own. You know, by himself he's not that big of a deal. He's
Well,
with.
no, you said it right though. It's like he has nothing to fight for now. Like he that was his only motivation.
Mhm.
He's lost. So it'll be interesting to see what he turns to.
Which it literally could be anything. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, I think that covers. Does that cover everything outside of the main
King's
the
Landing.
King's Landing stuff?
I believe
I
so.
think
And
it
if it's
does.
not, then whatever it is, it's not memorable enough to
Yeah,
mention.
great. Um, so we move over to King's Landing and we have a little bit of pre-fight because we know the fight's coming. We have a little bit of pre-fight talk with Tyrion and Jaime in his cell. And I mean, at this point, how many more scenes are we gonna have that are like great that are just in cells for the rest of the series? Like
Yeah.
probably a lot if I had to guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Couple more for sure.
and and you know what? Based on what we know what happens in this episode, this could very well be the last time that Jaime and Tyrion have a scene like this. And if this is the last one, like I said, kind of like with the Jaime and or the Barristan one and Jorah, that
Hmm.
I'm fine with that because I think this is a really good way to end it. If this is how it's going to end, I'm not sure if it is. I mean, this whole thing with Game of Thrones, you're never sure.
Yeah.
So they're kind of chatting about what Oberyn's chances are. They're kind of skeptical. Who knows? But then he gets into this whole story. They start chatting about their cousin, their simple cousin, who got dropped on his head as a baby, and who liked crushing beetles. Right? And he gets in this whole.
Talks for a long time.
It's a good story. It's the way he tells the story is good. The
Yeah.
story itself maybe
Yeah.
not that interesting. What it evokes is probably more interesting, and what he's kind of like what he's maybe trying to say by talking about it. Like about his cousin who used to just crush beetles and he just for no reason, and he was just constantly he just wanted to became obsessed with understanding why this happens. Like why is he crushing these beetles or why is he killing? They haven't done anything to him. He just can't understand it, and he said he'd have like dreams about it. So what's your take on the story? Like, what do you think he's trying to say in the story, or if it's just or anything at all?
It's weird. I think it's kind of Tyrion's like views on power and like his cousin is crushing the beetles because he can, and Tyrion grabs the one beetle and then lets it go, showing that like he's the kind of person that if he had that power wouldn't just do it for the sake of
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't just exact it for the sake of showing people you have power.
Mm-hmm. I kind
But
of
it's
yeah. I don't know. Sorry.
it's about like Tyrion how he feels like people who have the majority of the world has power over him
Yeah.
just because of his size and his how he looks. So he's always treated a certain way, and I don't know what I'm really getting
I
at.
don't know. It just
Actually,
seems like that's a cool way of looking at it. I looked at it differently. I think his story really it brought up made me think and brought up images of of Joffrey and his senseless torturing and violence and
hmm
all the senseless killing that we've seen on the show, right? And he it's like this cousin of his crushing beetles just is like an exemplar of like just the senseless death that is around him like ever since he's been young, and he just wants to understand why these things happen. And like people ask this question, right? Like, why do bad things happen to good people? Why does why does God let bad things happen, right? And this is just a question that everyone wrestles with, and I think that's like something he's wrestling with here. He's like, why is this happening to me? I'm not a bad person. Why am I being sentenced to death, right?
Yeah.
And he just can't understand it, and he's obsessed with trying to understand everything. Like that's how he is as a person. He wants to understand the world, and this when it comes to senseless violence and death, he can't understand it. There's no understanding it, and he can't wrap his head around that.
Of course, and obviously Tyrion's one of the Beatles in this situation. Yeah. There's a giant rock that's about to land on him,
and it's like his empathy towards creatures that don't have power, like the Beatles or Sansa, kind of got him into this like mess in the first place, So I think it's a great, the whole thing's like a great metaphor. So, yeah. And it can be interpreted however you want. Maybe it's not a metaphor at all. Maybe he just likes talking about his cousin. So it ends there, and then we go right into like the coup de grace, like the big moment of this episode, which does save it for me. Those last two scenes, like I said.
Made it worth it.
The fight setting fairly intimate, not super big, but big enough, right? So it gives it some grandioseness.
Yeah. Got a bit of a
crowd. And you have Oberyn. He's kind of swagging around like he does. He's got his like light armor on that looks like scales because he's the Red Viper, and he's drinking. He's having a cup of wine before, which probably not the best idea, but he says he always does that, and like the fight itself is really like amazingly choreographed, and like the whole spear fighting thing was really cool. Like I think that's like the coolest thing. Like the way he was using the spear was really cool.
Ridiculous with that thing.
Like we've seen so much sword fighting that like seeing a spear used that way is like really, really cool. It's like, does his first one break and he gets a new one? Is that what happens?
Yeah.
Okay.
The mountain like catches his first one and breaks it, and the guy throws him another one. He's super fast with that thing, and it's very different than what we're used to seeing, because the sword fighting we've seen for the most part has been pretty slow and like clang clang. Yeah. It's all about power.
Yeah.
And then this is the opposite.
So just being, because like they're from Dorne, so everything's different, so they fight with spears there.
Their sigil is a spear through the sun.
Oh, so there you go. So the fight, I don't even know how to like to talk about it. Like you just have to see it, and like obviously everyone who's listening to this has probably already seen it, and it's really well done, and like he's taunting him the whole time, right? He's just like about how trying to get him to confess to killing his sister, and
trying to get him to confess that.
And then so it's going well, and you're like, okay, this might be like this, because, and this is what like part that I was talking about earlier that I want to get into. It's that so he's fighting, and then he looks like he's gonna win, right? He like gets that one stab, he has him on the ground, right? And then he's trying to get him to confess, and then because he's so cocky, then he gets his head crushed in, which is one of the most gruesome things I think we've seen on the show. It was his eyes are like just the screams, right? And he does confess, which I don't know if that's important or not, because it's not clear if the mountain lives after everything. Like it's not clear if he's dead or not.
Yeah,
I don't know if you don't answer that. I guess like
okay. Yeah, he just kind of rolls off.
Yeah, so maybe he is dead, and like if I don't know if that matters or not. If they're both dead, like it makes no difference. Either way, Tyrion. The last thing we see is Cersei give like a smile. Jaime not be very happy about it, and then Tywin sentence him to death. Right. Mm-hmm. So cut to black, silence, which is always my favorite when they cut to black and it's just silence
after something so
and it's like I was literally like my heart was like boom 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 boom. Yeah. But so this is what bothers me about Game of Thrones, and this is more of a thing about Game of Thrones, not so much about this what happened here, though it is involved in it. So, I think the show is because of literature. It's It's doing things that are different just for the sake of being different, and just it's just this thing that's opposite of what you think. So that every story trope and like the way the story's whole setup is that Oberyn's supposed to win this fight. Really, I mean, it's always said, he's probably like the mountain's huge, blah blah blah. But the way it's done, it's like this whole victorious like I'll be your champion thing, right? Sets up the fact that he's probably gonna win. especially because he's defending one of the show's best characters, right? But your whole thing is like, well, with Game of Thrones is that they like to defy your expectations. Well, my idea is that, okay, just because it's not your expectations doesn't mean it's better storytelling. It's like it's just doing things the opposite just for the sake of doing it different, which is like that where's that hipster thing comes in. It's just doing it different for the sake of being different. And I don't think that makes it better. Just different. It's like you might be able to predict this happened just because it's the opposite of what you think is going to happen, right? How often does the thing that a normal story would have happen in this? Not very often, right? So at that point, you can start predicting things based on the opposite of what would happen in a regular story. So we talk about what's happening next week, and we have 100 men versus 100,000, right? And this whole thing about how they have no chance. They keep talking about how they have no chance to win, right? Over and over and over again. So they're not expected to win. So they're probably going to, just based on the fact that it's the unexpected outcome. That's what I mean by predictably unpredictable. And for instance, with this, I don't think this makes it a better. Maybe I'm just upset that Oberyn's dead. Like, I don't think that's what it is. I mean, I did like him as a character, but I don't think that just killing Oberyn in this way, and doing it this way is somehow, in such a gruesome way, is somehow better. Makes it a better story than it would have been if he'd won this fight. I don't know. Maybe in retrospect of knowing the whole story and looking at this as just as an element of one grander piece, but being at this is the far into the story as I know that we are, I don't like it. Does that make sense?
I for sure get it. And even Martin himself has said his whole goal, or one of his goals with the show, or with the books rather, was to tell the story that you don't expect. Like you expect Ned Stark to be the hero, and he gets his head cut off. And then after that, you expect his son to, rise up and avenge his father, and then the Red Wedding happens. He said a few times that he doesn't want to tell conventional stories.
Yes, okay, that's fine. But
look at what it did. Look at what Ned Stark's head losing his head. Look at what that did to the rest of the show, and it created room for different storytelling that's been phenomenal.
Sure,
because it's so unconventional.
But this doesn't seem like it really opens it. I mean, it's hard for me to tell.
It's hard without knowing what happens next.
But it's like, it's easy to say that from your perspective, but from my perspective, this just looks like another, oh, gotcha. We thought you thought this was going to happen, and then we did this instead because, it's different. Like, no, that doesn't make it, it just makes it different, Well,
I mean, it works. This is why the show is so compelling, is because there's no possible way for you to guess that.
At this point now, I can. I think that I can predict things based on the fact, yes, Dan, I think I could now, based on the fact that these things are happening opposite of what you think is going to happen. Like, not even just like something unexpected happens, like a dragon flew in and killed. Like, not that would be what I would want, or somehow better than what happened, right? And just killed them both. That wouldn't be better. But that's unexpected. That's literally just the opposite of what you thought was going to happen, right? And especially, and I don't like being manipulated. Like, don't set up this whole thing, like this whole heroic thing, just to be undid by like a head crush. Not that that's just some small thing. Like, it was cool looking.
Just be undone by being like standing too.
Yeah, like you know what I mean. Like, it just seems so.
Yeah, it's very frustrating when you read it in the books too.
So I don't know. Maybe my stance on this will change. I don't even know if my stance makes sense.
No, it does. You're not the only one. Plenty of people are frustrated with what happened. Like, you care about these characters, and then nobody gets what they deserve. You think Oberyn has his revenge, and the Mountain's getting his comeuppance, and it's never going to play out exactly the way you want it to. But that's also one of the reasons that everybody loves this show.
Sure. I mean, the guy who's talking, the guy from Entertainment Weekly that does the recaps that I read to fill in the parts that I don't remember completely when I'm doing the show notes, he mentioned when going into this was that he's like talking about a friend of his that went and watched Titanic in the theaters like 12 times, right? And they're like, he's like, why do you watch it 12 times? You know what's going to happen, right? It's always going to be the same. Leo's going to drown in the Atlantic every time. And she's like, well, I go back because I hope that at one time the ending's going to be different, which is kind of dumb, but it's like, it's one of those things. It's like you watch you can still watch it over and over again and still hope that, just don't make that one stupid move and everything will be fine, right?
Yeah, you can watch it over and over again and get caught up in the same emotions.
Yeah.
If it's done well enough.
Which I think this is probably done well enough. It'll have to stand the test of time. I think this is one of the coolest fights, like mono fights I've ever seen on television. It's really, really cool, especially like visually with a massive giant man that is the Mountain and whoever played whatever his name is in real life. And then you have
it's really hard to pronounce.
Yeah, and then you have Oberyn, who's like this so much more slender and speed with this really interesting fighting technique. It's like really cool looking. But yeah, the way it plays out doesn't make me very happy.
Yeah, it sucks. Oberyn won the fight and then lost just because he let it happen too long. Like
yeah.
And then but like you pointed out, the Mountain does admit to what he did right before he kills Oberyn.
Does anyone hear that? Like I don't even.
He like screams it.
Okay, so. Does that even matter? Like
Well,
that's what I mean. Like, he does it in front of the Lannisters, and if the Lannisters told him to do it, then like, who cares? Who's gonna be there to punish them? No one.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that was always a rumor. Like, and now the audience was pretty much knew already, but now we know for sure. But in terms of what you said about the wall, I would say the conventional story would be this is David versus Goliath, and the conventional storytelling would be that they would win. So if it was trying to subvert your expectations, they would lose next week. That's what happened. Like season 1 is when we expected Ned Stark to get out of there, and he didn't.
I don't know.
Again, I already know what happened. Like I'm not.
I don't know. I think I'm just basing this off of how the stories are set up, right? So the way that this fight was set up was done in a way that feels manipulative, that you set up this character, you have this great scene where he talks to Tyrion in the dungeon and tells him about him when he was a baby and how he's going to be his champion and all this stuff, right? And we like Tyrion and we like Oberyn, so we're all happy about that. But then you have the fight play out this way, right? And because of how it was set up, it feels manipulative because of the way it ends. And the way that the thing at the wall's been set up is that they have no chance of winning. They literally have never once said, I don't think any one character said, what are we going to do after this whole fight? What, we should go get chicken? Like, no, it's just like, I guess we're dead, burn my body when I'm dead, So if it is set up that way and then they do win, I mean, maybe that is like, it would be surprising, but I think it's just one of those things of doing the opposite of how the show set it up, or how the story's been told.
Like, that's you're kind of like you're painting a broad stroke though. Like there's still a lot of content in it. Like how does it happen or whatever.
Yeah, sure. I absolutely want. I'm interested to see. I'm still interested to see what happens. I don't want to see. I don't want to see this story that I think is really interesting fall into these like this trap of just trying to be different for the sake of being different. And I think reading into what you said about George R. R. Martin, and I've read some quotes myself, it seems like that sometimes seems to be a motivation for him, is that just to do something different for no reason.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a good way to start.
Keep the readers and the audience on their toes. Keep them guessing, keep them interested.
Absolutely. And I don't think you have to do that. I just don't think that doing it at every possible turn is better or makes it better. It's like you still want to be you still need to have characters you're invested in. If you're killing them all the time, then it's like what interest, like what is there left to be interested in? Like I don't want to watch a show about Cersei like living in the King's Landing, like you know what I mean? Like I don't care about that. So I mean maybe that's just me being selfish. I don't know. Whatever.
No, that's a valid point, and that's a valid thing to not look forward to, but you'll see what happens, and I don't know what to tell you without ruining anything, right? Like,
well, yeah. I mean, I'm not asking you to ruin anything. It's one of these things that's like with the kind of like with the Red Wedding, where it's just frustrating, but maybe it'll play out. If it doesn't, I'll be the first to tell you that it wasn't it wasn't earned, I guess.
Well, I agree with you. It wasn't. I agree with you that it's still frustrating and it still doesn't make full sense to me that it happened this way, but it did. And it's like that's just how death works, though. You have to deal with it.
Okay. All right. I think we've covered. I think we've covered this enough. I think we're getting a little bit meta here. So, do you have any final thoughts? Overall thoughts on this week's episode?
Yeah, I think I said it before, but I really loved the episode. A lot of big things happened. Well, the big things that happened were the Sansa storyline her defending Littlefinger, and they're still alive, and she's badass now and Elaine now. Um, Jorah being exiled is pretty big. The Theon stuff is kind of big just now that it's not that big a deal, but now that Ramsay is Bolton, and then obviously the fight was huge and very well done.
Yeah. I I'd put this somewhere in the middle of the pack for me. I mean, the ending is huge, which gives it definitely a boost. The rest was not particularly compelling. A lot of it felt like filler. Some of it did anyway. Like a lot of the stuff in Marine with the Grey Worm stuff. We talked about that. I didn't like even the stuff in the Eyrie was meh. Like the stuff with the Hound felt wasted. I'm just trying to bring to mind everything else that happened this episode other than this big fight is tough, which is usually not a good sign. I can think of in episode 2 when Joffrey died, how great the whole setup was. This doesn't feel that particularly great to me. I mean, I really did like the scene in the dungeon, and I've always liked Tyrion scenes, and I think everyone mostly does. Some of it does feel like setup, like I said, the stuff with Molestown and Castle Black. But maybe that'll pay off next week with the Watchers on the Wall. So, like I said, I'll put it somewhere in the middle. I had to pick my favorite scene, which I don't have to, but we have been doing anyway. It would be the fight scene. So,
For sure.
Followed closely by the intimate one beforehand. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you were just saying, it would have been nice to have in this episode, rather than some of that filler, a scene just touching base with Oberyn before the fight.
Yeah.
I don't know, him with Tyrion again, because they've already done that, but they could have had him with basically anybody. He's done it. He's rocked it every scene he's had. It would have been nice to have him talking about it, even though they kind of addressed it with him being overconfident right before the fight.
Yeah, but it just feels so rushed. It's he's such a great actor, and it's like they've done such a good job of incorporating these scenes that are not in the book that generally are some of the best scenes in the show, right? To have them take an opportunity instead of wasting time with Grey Worm and Missandei, fill that with a great intimate scene with Oberyn would have actually made the fight have more weight to it,
For sure, yeah.
Because the way they did it really played it out as all the weight is on Tyrion's shoulders, and really there's a lot on both Oberyn's and Tyrion's.
Yeah, they both are in it for their own reasons.
Yeah, so that covers this week. I'm excited for next week. The synopsis for next week's episode is Jon faces a great challenge at the wall. That is it. So, so it's I don't know.
It will be the whole episode.
So we'll see. I think, like I said, that's why I'm pretty sure that the whole thing is going to be at the wall. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be season 4, episode 9, which is usually the big episode, right? The 9th episode. In the meantime, make sure to follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, BABBLE, so not the biblical version, obviously not. And like us on Facebook. We're probably going to be recording another Tower Babble podcast, which it is our flagship podcast for our site, towerbabblepodcast.com. Later today, we'll be talking about some of the news, get it out of the way, so we have E3 to talk about next week. So make sure to tune into that. You can also find that one on iTunes. In the meantime, we will talk to you next week.
See ya.
Today's Game of Thrones theme was played by Pisces Rising, the epic Game of Thrones theme cover.